Hey there, and welcome to Large Format Friday. I'm your host, Matt Marrash, and if this is the first time you're stopping by, here's a playlist of all of our LFF episodes. And if you haven't subscribed yet, each and every Friday, there's gonna be something new in the world of large format photography. A few weeks ago, one of my coworkers brought in a bunch of these really old, musty suitcases. And they kind of looked like they belonged to somebody's great aunt. Inside this case, something pretty crazy. These are some handmade pinhole cameras. That's about all I know about them so far. But on the inside, we can see there are two big old cameras in here. I'm gonna crack one open. And the one that intrigued me the most was the one that had this label on it, and that's about as far as I know about it, and it's this guy. This is an 8x10" pinhole, which of course is up my alley because I'm into 8x10, but then there's also this crazy thing. It's a paint can that's been turned into a pinhole camera. My goodness. To kind of manage expectations for the folks at home, I have little to no idea about these cameras. I've never shot pinhole this large before, and we're gonna be experimenting with this together. So I'm gonna move around the camera, talk about some things that I see on them, some cool features, and then we're gonna head out in the field, test them out, and share the results. That's gonna be kind of what we do today. So I'm not as jazzed about the camera because, well, it's a paint can, but this one really looks like it's got some neat construction features on it. And we do have our first label of who made this thing. So this was a camera that was made by Mr. Bob Gratian, but this is an 8x10 pinhole camera. And as far as DIY cameras go, this has more build quality than some of the new cameras that are on the market. It's got this beautiful wood construction with these little metal kind of cabinetry facets, keep things on there. It has these awesome little carry handles, and at the top, it even has this neat little homemade viewfinder. So it's just some pieces of PVC, and there's a little fisheye magnifier in there to kind of give me a field of view similar to what the millimeter or the focal length is on this. And interestingly enough, I already kind of know what this looks like because this is a 120 millimeter pinhole, and I already have a lens I've been shooting with for years, a lens, not a pinhole lens. This is a 121 millimeter f8. It's one of my favorite, well, it's the widest lens that I own, and it was my first like super wide angle lens, and it's still the widest one I have. So I already kind of have an idea of what 120 looks like, but I've never shot with a pinhole this large. Now I do have some buddies that shoot pinhole upwards of 8x10 and even ultra large format size, and I've always been intrigued by it because it's sharp, but it's not so sharp. It's like squinting your eyes, right? So the way a pinhole works is we're creating a super tiny opening equivalent to f-stops that can get into the hundreds. And what we're doing is we're squeezing those rays of light, so all of those different color wavelengths of light we're trying to force them to converge at the same time, so we can't tell that depth difference. So light that's reflecting off something really far in the distance and something really close, we can't perceive that difference. So everything's sharp and nothing's sharp at the same time. It's one of the cool things about pinhole. Let's just go from the front and we'll work our way to the back. So this actually has this really cool series like yellow-orange filter on here, which is awesome. Let's see, what other data do I have on here? Oh my goodness. It actually has some math on here. This is approximately f264. That's a huge F number. There are bubble levels. There's this giant bubble level on it. So I know when the camera is set level. Oh good, my shop table is level. That's good to know. We already talked about the carrying handles. It has, looks like it has some ways to access the film back. So right now, there's a piece of foam on the inside here. I'm guessing that's to back the holder, so that's to kind of set it in and hold it there properly during the exposure. But let's see what this looks like inside. So there's this little wooden peg that holds the top. So that's my top flap. I should have a bottom flap here too. There we go. It's just got a little latch. I really can't get over how nicely constructed the wood on this is. It looks very nice. Okay, so that's open. Open this. Oh, there's another custom design by Bob Gratian. Bob, you're a craftsman. Oh, Nate, there's this really thin piece of MDF with some foam on it, and that's really well made. And then on the inside, we can see, looks like he has inserted, there's a tripod insert for horizontal as well as vertical, which is a nice little detail. And you can see everything is blacked out on the inside, and there's some nice lining foam. That's actually lined better than the darkroom doors I talked about last week. Just empty space. Just got to keep the dark in. That's the biggest thing. All right, let's get my film back in. Wow, okay, so I might have to clean some of the dust out of this. There's definitely a lot of dust. So it's a 0.018 wide angle, so I'm guessing that's the measurement of the opening. This is so cool. And honestly, I'm not expecting big things because I don't shoot a lot of pinhole, but I just want to see what I can get with this. So I did want to do this episode on pinhole cameras, mainly so I could discuss the do's, don'ts, and some of the common pitfalls when shooting with pinhole cameras. One of the most common things that happens when you're shooting with pinhole is you're already severely limited in terms of your exposure, right? You're forcing a really high F number, which means you're probably going to be shooting in adequate lighting, like really, really bright lighting. And that's because a lot of films suffer from reciprocity failure. Well, all films do, you just have to hit that certain point. Reciprocity happens when we give film an inadequate amount of light, like too little light. This happens with a super, super fast shutter speed. That's not something we worry about in large format. That's with something like really fast focal plane shutters that can achieve thousandths of a second. Reciprocity can happen there, but reciprocity usually happens when we don't give it enough light over the course of longer exposures. More of your traditional grain emulsions like your Ilford HP5, your Kodak Tri-X, things like that, they will suffer reciprocity failure as soon as a half to 1 second of exposure time. As you give that film less and less light, you need even more of that lesser amount of light to make the same exposure for what you metered. So we can imagine if we magnify our f-stop from something like 64 to 264, I'm gonna really need to account for that reciprocity failure, meaning I'm probably gonna wanna shoot this outside. So I recommend if you're getting started with pinhole or even large format in general, and you're doing something niche like pinhole, use a film that you know, or one where the data is out there and it's really commonly available. What I'm gonna do in this, I already have some Ilford FP4 loaded up into my film holder, so I'm gonna take some FP4. It's a pretty decently bright day out today. I'm gonna shoot a little bit with that and develop it and see what the results are. All right, I'm just set up in the front yard here, just trying to do something simple. Set my tripod up. The camera itself is super lightweight. It's really relieving just how light it is. I'm just gonna do a little front shot here, drop this down. I threw an Arca-Swiss plate that I had from my digital camera on here. Is this complete overkill? You betcha. But I don't want it going anywhere at the end of the day. Just using the bubble level up top to find my level. That looks pretty good. And one of the relieving things about a camera system like this is I don't have to worry about having a loop, having a dark cloth. I just really kind of go by my finder here. Yeah, I like that. So first things first, let's meter as if we're shooting our film normally. So today I'm using Ilford FP4. It's a classic standby, really good for contrasty scenes, just all around pretty decent. It is a traditional grain film, so I will have to worry about reciprocity failure, but I'm not too concerned with that because I've got the charts all ready for it. So I've got my meter. I'm actually set to 64 because that's what I like to shoot my FP4 at for the developer I'm using. Developer-wise, I like to use PyroCAD HD. It just makes sure that I don't go crazy on my highlights. I don't get anything super blown out. I'm getting some direct sun starting to peek out, and I'm just poking around looking for some metering. So I'll hit the white parts, I'll hit the blue parts, and then I'll hit some of these darker shadows too. That'll help me find where I need to be. F16, I need about a 15th of a second. That's at ISO 64. So I need to find it at F264. I'm just using MrPinhole.com's webpage, and he has this little chart of equivalencies. So if I find a metered exposure at X, I can translate it to an exposure for 264. So I'm gonna find it for F16 is a 15th of a second, and a 15th of a second over to that chart is 17 seconds. Now that 17 seconds is prior to reciprocity failure, and that's really important. If it's at 17 seconds and I factor in reciprocity failure, I'm gonna have to triple up my time. So I'm actually gonna leave the camera open for almost an entire minute. I'm gonna go about 50 seconds, and that's gonna give me enough to accommodate the lighting. You can see I have my photographer's favorite on the front. Little gaffer tape, that's gonna be plenty to cover the hole for the duration of this exposure. And now let's go see about loading this thing up. I'm actually not too sure if I'm just supposed to stick the film holder in or if I'm supposed to take the back all the way off and seat it. So for this first time, I'm gonna take the back completely off. I'm gonna open up the hinges. So I got a holder of FP4. Open up my hinges. Take this out. All right, so holder number one. Just gonna set it gently against the foam. Gonna add this piece of foam right here. I'll latch that up. That's actually a pretty good latch system. A little bit of tension, nothing too crazy. Lock her down. Yeah, that feels like it's in there. I'm actually pretty excited. Okay. So we're gonna time out a 50-second exposure. Open our dark slide. There we go. All right, now we're rolling. Seven, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pop my gaff back on, reinsert the dark slide. There we go. I definitely think this is one where I have to undo the hinges each time. So I'm gonna put this filter on, and then I'm gonna go for a 3-minute exposure. And that should be about the right amount. Pop open the second one, place my holder. This time I'm gonna do it this side. That's probably how it's supposed to go. Again, this is all new to me. Pop that in, pop that in, lock it down. That's pretty good. Yeah, that feels pretty solid. All right, now for the hard part, 3 minutes. My goodness, that's a long time, but let's do it. All right. My goodness, that's a long exposure. All right, we're gonna call that 3. One of the most surprising things about this camera is just how solid this back is. The fact that it uses the 2 pieces of foam, I really like that. And the double hinges, this is nice. I don't feel at any point that like the holder is going anywhere. It feels really, really nice and snug in place. I don't know if it's because there's a really precision pinhole going on here, but the fall off is really not that bad on a lot of these negatives, and they appear to be really, really even. I did notice one thing about some of the negatives where I was utilizing the series filter attachment. It appears the series filter might not be 100% centered over top because the corners of all of my negatives where I use the series filter has just this little, like a teeny tiny bit that is clipping. It's not the end of the world. Come on, this is Pinhole. But I really, really liked what the scans looked like on my negatives, and it may be a combination of things, but because I am using a staining developer like PyroCat HD, the negatives are really nice and even. My highlights are really well controlled. There was nothing that was completely blown to smithereens. I was able to recover highlight information. And overall, the images look pretty cool. At thumbnail size and even at about 8x10 contact print size, I really can't tell it's Pinhole. It's only once I punch in to 50%, 100%, okay, yeah, now I know it's Pinhole for sure. But it looks pretty cool. There's some areas that actually look close to sharp. In broad daylight, I used 2 different films. The first 4 shots, I used some Ilford FP4 that I had lying around in some holders. And then for the last 4 shots that I did, I loaded up some expired T-Max 100. T-Max 100 has really good reciprocity failure, so it doesn't fall off as quickly as the FP4 I was using, but still has decent speed. And in the PyroCat developer I use, I was actually just metering it at 100 instead of at 64 like I was for FP4. So I was getting a smidge more speed out of it, and I didn't have to have as long an exposure time even in less light. So that's why I ended up going with that. And then at the very, very end, I was like, you know what, wait a second. I'm working with all this flash power for this RA4 reversal process that I'm doing. What happens if I stand maybe a foot or 2 from a 2400 watt second flash head? I just pop it right in front of me. Well, I probably should have used all 4800 watt seconds of flash. There's barely anything on these negatives, but there is still a little bit of detail, and there's some crazy pictures of me blinding myself with some flash at point blank range. Flash photography is possible with Pinhole, but the name of the game here is power. You have to have a ton of flash power pumping in to your subject. You can do that through repeated pops, so you can use a lesser power light and you just keep on flashing, and that could be cool for some sequences or tabletop, but gonna be really hard for people in the shot. If you're photographing things that are moving or capable of moving, you're gonna have to have a whole lot of flash power to freeze that action. So I was just having fun with it because I don't see a lot of people using flash with Pinhole, and now I know why. So hopefully this was kind of a fun little romp through a crazy camera that I had never seen or never used prior to today's video. The results are pretty cool. I'm gonna post the full resolution size up on my Flickr page, and I'll link to those down below in the description. If you have any questions about this Pinhole camera or Pinhole in general, you can drop those comments down below. If you have any recommendations for Pinhole apps and other things that you like, let me know down below for that as well, because this is my first foray into Pinhole. How did I do? What'd you think of the results? I'm actually pretty excited about it. I might be tempted to go out and try a few more things with this Pinhole. I kind of want to try that crazy reversal process with the Pinhole, but I know those exposures might be like day-long endeavors because of the really, really slow speed of that paper after it's filtered. So I'm gonna keep playing around with this. Thanks again for stopping by. If you have any long form questions that are related to this or anything large format, you can always feel free to shoot me an email, largeformatquestions@gmail.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we'll catch you next time for more LFF.